Think about the last time you really hurt yourself. A bad fall, a wrist bent the wrong way, an ankle that folded under you on the stairs. It's miserable for a while. But somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know exactly how the story ends. A doctor sets the bone, you get a cast, and something for the pain, and for a few weeks, the world quietly looks after you while your body stitches itself back together on the couch. Now, keep that same broken bone, and that same white flash of pain, and strip everything else away. You're lying on frozen ground 12,000 years ago. Your leg twisted at an angle it was never built to hold. And the moment you try to stand, it gives out beneath you. Walking is finished. Running is a memory. And you can't even haul yourself the few feet back to the fire that's already guttering down to embers. To a band of people who stay alive only by keeping pace with the herds, you have just turned into the one thing the Ice Age never forgives. A mouth that still needs feeding, on a body that can no longer earn its place. Dead weight that somebody else will now have to lift and carry. Out past the last of the firelight, the dark has begun to shift and circle. A ring of wolves is drawing in, something heavier moving behind them. All of it pulled toward the scent of an animal that can no longer rise to defend itself. By every rule that has ever governed every other creature alive, this is the moment you quietly vanish from the story. And yet we know this man didn't, because 12,000 years later we lifted his skeleton out of the earth and found that shattered leg healed clean, grown back as strong as it had ever been. For 6 impossible weeks, something held death away from him, and it wasn't medicine. In your world, a broken bone is an inconvenience you schedule around. In his, it comes for everything at once. These people stayed alive by moving. Trailing the herds, chasing the water, keeping a step ahead of the winter, so a body that cannot move is a body that cannot eat. He brings home no meat now. He can't hold the pace when the camp lifts and follows the animals, and a leg that won't bear his weight leaves him unable to outrun even the lion that scents weakness from a mile off. Out among the animals, the arithmetic is merciless and plain. Whoever falls behind is whoever gets taken, and that is usually the whole of it. By every law of survival, this man should already be gone. Instead, the earth handed him back with his bones grown whole, which means that for the 6 weeks a break takes to knit, something kept him alive. What? Start with how a bone even breaks out there. Maybe it's a slide down an icy slope, or a mammoth that wheels around at the worst possible second, or a hunt that turns on one misjudged step, a kick from a panicking animal, a boot skidding on wet rock. And just like that, the strongest hunter in the band is helpless on the ground. Now, the body itself is astonishing. Leave a bone set roughly straight and, over about 6 weeks, it weaves itself back together, often stronger than it was before. Your ancestors even had a few tricks to help it along. Splints lashed from wood and hide, a chew of willow bark that carried the very same compound we now bottle and call aspirin. But this is exactly where the trap springs shut, because none of that is the hard part. The bone repairing itself is the easy part. Staying alive long enough to let it happen is the part that should have been impossible. The obvious answer is that they had medicine, herbs, healers, a bit of hard-won knowledge, and that much is true. They did. But think honestly about what a splint and a strip of willow bark can actually do. They can straighten the bone and take the sharp edge off the pain, and that is where their power ends. A poultice doesn't fill an empty stomach for 6 weeks. A healer's chant doesn't put a wall between a sleeping man and the wolves that come when the fire dies. No remedy ever brewed will lift a grown adult and carry him across a river when the camp has to move on. Pain was never really the problem here. So herbs were never really the answer. Whatever kept this man alive wasn't a thing you could hold at all. It was a choice, someone else's choice, made again and again, day after day, for weeks. Picture those 6 weeks he spends unable to stand. Every day, food that someone could have swallowed themselves is handed to him instead. Water is carried to a man who cannot fetch it, and he is kept warm and clean and watched over through the long nights, when the fire sinks low and the dark leans in. When the herd finally moves and the whole band has no choice but to follow, he isn't left behind to crawl. A grown man is lifted onto someone's back and carried, mile after mile. In return, he offers nothing. No meat, no protection, not 1 hour of useful work, for a month and a half. In the cold ledger of survival, keeping him alive is madness, pure cost, with no return, and the sensible thing, the animal thing, is to leave him where he fell. And sometimes, if we're honest, that is exactly what happened. But not always. And the times it didn't are the ones written permanently into their bone. This is the point where the skeletons themselves begin to speak. Again and again, archaeologists lift out bones that were once badly broken and then, unmistakably, healed, set close to straight, fused back into a single piece, carrying the clear signature of a person who went on living for months or years afterward. A healed break is never only a medical detail, it's a social one. For a bone to mend, its owner had to be fed, sheltered, and defended for weeks on end, and there is simply no way to fake that. A healed femur is a receipt. It's hard physical proof that at the very moment this person was useless and completely helpless, somebody decided to keep them alive regardless. And it doesn't end with broken leg. Some skeletons carry damage far worse than a clean break. There's the man whose arm withered away after a wound, and who lived on for years with a limb he could no longer use. The elder who had lost every tooth yet somehow kept eating, because another pair of hands was mashing his food soft for a mouth that couldn't chew. The blind and the crippled who lasted long past the point where the wild should have quietly claimed them. Every one of these skeletons repeats the same message, only louder. Each extra year of their lives was paid for out of someone else's effort. Meat they hadn't hunted, protection they could never repay, care given for no reason but the caring itself. This is not what survival of the fittest is supposed to look like. And as it turns out, that contradiction is the entire point. Come back to your own life for a second. You break a leg today and it's almost comfortable, meals appear, people check in on you, and you heal on a couch without ever once asking yourself whether you'd have survived that same injury out in the wild. The honest answer is that you wouldn't have, not on your own, because no human could. Every single one of us is here for one reason. At our most helpless, as newborns, who couldn't so much as lift our own heads, somebody chose to carry us. That refusal to abandon the helpless isn't some gentle modern manners we recently dreamed up. It's the oldest and deepest survival tool our species has ever owned. You are alive today precisely because it is so ancient. Let's be honest about the darker side, because it was real. When a band was starving, when the choice came down to carrying one person or losing everyone, the injured were sometimes left behind. It happened. These weren't saints. They were human beings making impossible decisions, and fear and hunger are powerful things that don't always lose the argument. But here is what's genuinely remarkable. Given how merciless the maths was, they carried each other far more often than they ever had to. What the bones describe is not a species that discarded its weak, but one that kept choosing, against every screaming survival instinct, to pick the weak up and take them along. Which drops us straight back onto the real question sitting underneath this whole video. Because carrying the helpless was never weakness, it was strategy, the best one we ever stumbled onto. Nurse an injured hunter through his 6 weeks, and you get your finest hunter back, good as new. Protect a blind old woman and you've protected an entire library. Every drought she remembers, every trail, every plant that heals or kills. All of it still alive inside her head. Even a man who can't walk can sit and shape tools, tend the fire, keep watch over the children. A band that throws its injured away is throwing away its own memory and its own future, while a band that carries them keeps everything they know. Compassion, it turns out, was not the soft thing that made us weak. It was the hard, calculated thing that made us win. So let's turn the question we opened with completely around. We were asking how the bone healed, but the bone was never really the mystery. Bone knits itself back together on its own. That's just biology doing its job. The true mystery is why anyone bothered to keep this man breathing long enough for the biology to finish. Nothing compelled them to. Every instinct they had, and every cold calculation pointed the same way. Toward leaving him. They refused. And the reason they refused is the single most human thing in this entire story. Something a scientist once managed to fold into a single sentence. A long time ago, the anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked what she considered the very first sign of civilization. People expected her to name a tool, or a weapon, or perhaps the taming of fire or the birth of art. Her answer was a healed femur. Her reasoning ran like this. Out in the wild, a creature that breaks its leg simply dies, because it cannot flee, it cannot feed itself, and no other animal will ever pause to help it, so there a broken bone is a death sentence every single time. A human thigh bone that broke and then healed can therefore mean only one thing. That someone stayed. Someone carried that person somewhere safe, brought them food, stood guard over them, and sat beside them week after week while the bone slowly knit itself whole. That healed bone is the oldest evidence we have that a human being looked at another who could offer them absolutely nothing in return, and chose to keep them alive anyway. So how did the first Americans survive a broken bone? Not through medicine, or herbs, or clever tricks, but because someone loved them enough to carry them. That exact impulse is the thing that made us human. And it's the very same thing that carried you, long before you could walk. We've spent this whole channel walking beside the first Americans, the people who feared nothing, who made the night their own, who laid their dead to rest like kings. And the oldest proof that they were already fully, completely us, isn't a spear point or a cave, painting, or a grave. It's a broken bone that was given the chance to heal. Somewhere out there lies a hunter who shattered his leg 12,000 years ago, and lived. For no reason other than that, his people gathered him up and carried him home. You are the newest link in a very long chain of human beings who simply refuse to leave one another behind. So tell me down in the comments. Who carried you, back when you couldn't stand on your own? Go call them. And the first chapters of this story are already waiting for you.